Yes, 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 real time, real time, real time. That's what I'm talking about. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is John O'Keefe, Mr. O. To many of you, it is a blessing and a privilege to be in your presence today. I want to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that as I dig deeper into Gregor the Overlander by Suzanne Collins, I become wildly, mildly, crowdly just overwhelmed by how incredibly well built the story is so far. I want to say welcome to your week. Welcome to your week. We are going to do everything we possibly can to be together for the next 4 days. Not going to be here on the 5th. That means the Friday, the 12th. But those of you who watch later, there's only going to be 4 sessions this week. And so I want to make sure that you and I and we are aware of that when I already am aware of that. Where am I going? Well, I'm going to go out and see the world a little bit. Tell you about it when I get back. Ladies and gentlemen, fantastic weekend. I hope that you had a wonderful adventure. I myself got to listen to music, dance like crazy. Yes, in the privacy of my own home, but FaceTimed with a buddy while we did it. So we danced together via virtual worlds. And then kayaking, river, it was amazing. Water was gorgeous, cold. Got my first roll down. I've been practicing. Hey, practicing. It's kind of like reading, right? Why am I talking about kayaking right now? Why am I doing that? Well, that's because I've been practicing for a really long time to try to get my roll down. Got it. Thanks, T. Thanks, Steve. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Michael. What a great trip that was. Anyway, back to reading, right? Because that's why we're here. Gregor, 11-year-old kid, almost about the same age as you are, maybe a little bit older, maybe a little bit younger, depending on who you are. But I want to let you know that you're never too old to indulge in a great story such as this. As I spoke with a very good friend of mine, Samantha, who is probably going to join us at some point because this was her book. This was the series that changed everything for her. Yeah, she enjoyed some books, but this was the series. Changed everything. 4th grade for that girl, and I'm hoping that she's going to come and join us in a little while. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get back to the story. Gregor, Underlanders, went to the castle, was invited in by Vicus. How nice is it that you show up in a new land and you just happen to get welcomed by the king and queen of the land, right? Like, that's what I want. I want to show up someplace and have the president or the leader be like, whoa, hey, it's John O'Keefe. Welcome. Come on in. Let's go have some turkey, right? Like, how lucky is that? Like, he's going to get to go take a bath in this new world, like in the castle. And then he's going to go to the high hall and have dinner. Really? I mean, how lucky is that, right? I'm not quite sure where Suzanne Collins is going to go with this whole cleanup thing, but I definitely know that these Overlanders stink. So let's find out. Last time we were together, Boots said some really cute things to the Underland people who were going to help them get cleaned up, and they just busted out laughing. Thought it was the cutest thing in the world. 2-year-old, oh, it says all the cute things. So we just know that Boots has this trait of being able to make people feel good, right? She brings smiles to people's faces, like my friend Mag. Like, all of these ideas that just happen to show up, right, are parts of who they are. So we're getting to know that part. You're 11 years old and you're being welcomed by a king. That's pretty cool. You must have done something pretty special. Oh yeah, that's right. The winds have to be just right. Otherwise, when you fall down the vent, the vapors are going to tear you apart. So fortunately, Gregor made it down the New York vent hole to the Underland, which was the 5th gateway to get in there, right? So let's see what happens. So this is where we left off. Gregor sometimes wished he could be more like that. He had a couple of good friends, but avoided becoming part of any one clique at school. It all came down to who you ate lunch with. He could have sat with the guys he ran track with or the band kids, but instead he liked being with Angelina, who was always in some school play, and Larry, who just, well, mostly he just drew stuff. People who didn't really know him thought Gregor was stuck up, but he was mostly just private. He had more trouble opening up to people after his dad left, but even before that, he'd never been as friendly as Boots. A young woman who looked about 15 stepped forward and held out her arms. "I am called Dulcet. May I take you, Boots? You would care for a bath?" Boots looked at Gregor for confirmation. "It's okay, bath time. You want a bath, Boots?" he asked. "Yes, yes, yes," cried Boots happily. "Bath!" She reached out for Dulcet, who took her from Gregor's arms. "Meet you Merith and Perdita," said Dulcet, indicating a man and woman next to her. They were both tall and muscular, and although they didn't carry weapons, Gregor had a feeling they were guards. "Hey," he said. Merith and Perdita both gave him formal but friendly nods. Dulcet wrinkled her nose and poked Boots gently in the tummy. "You have need of clean catchcloth," she said. Gregor could guess what a catchcloth was. "Oh, yeah, her diaper, yeah, it needs to be changed. It's been a little while. She's going to get a rash." "I poop," said Boots without apology and tugged on her diaper. "I will attend to it," said Dulcet with an amused smile, and Gregor couldn't help thinking how much nicer she was than Luxa. "You will follow to the waters, Gregor the Overlander?" "Yes, thank you. I'll follow to the waters," said Gregor. He was struck by how formal he sounded, and he didn't want the Underlanders to think he was making fun of them. The roaches had been so easy to insult. I mean, yeah, thanks, he responded. Dulcet nodded and waited for him to follow in step beside her. Merith and Perdita followed a few steps behind. "They're guards, all right," thought Gregor. The group left the entrance room and walked down a spacious hallway. They passed dozens of arched doorways that opened into large chambers, staircases, and halls. Gregor quickly realized that he'd need a map to navigate this place. He could ask directions, but that would be too smart if he was trying to escape. That wouldn't be too smart if he was trying to escape. They could call him their guest, but it didn't change the fact that he and Boots were prisoners. Guests could leave if they wanted to. Prisoners had to escape. And that was exactly what he planned to do. But how? Even if he could find his way back to the platform, no one would let him down, and he couldn't jump 200 feet to the ground. But there must be other ways to enter the palace, he thought. There must be. "I have never met an Overlander before," said Dulcet, interrupting his train of thought. "It's only because of the baby I meet you now." "Because of Boots?" Gregor said. "I take care of the young ones for many," said Dulcet. "I would not usually meet so important a person as an Overlander," she said shyly. "Well, that's too bad, Dulcet," said Gregor, "because you're the nicest person I've met in the Underland yet." Dulcet blushed, and the boy, Dulcet blushed, and boy, when these people blushed, they really blushed. Her skin turned pink as ripe watermelon. Not just her face either. She colored the tips of her toes to the tips of her fingers to the tips of her head. I mean the tip of her head. "Oh," she stammered, very embarrassed. "Oh, that is too kind for me to accept." Behind him, the two guards murmured something to each other. Sorry. Gregor guessed that he had said something way out of line, but he didn't know that. Maybe you weren't supposed to imply a nanny was nicer than the queen, even if it was true. He was going to have to be more careful about what came out of his mouth. Manage yourself. Respect the learning space of others. Treat people with dignity and respect. This is a safe place. You got to be careful of what comes out of your mouth sometimes. Fortunately, just then they stopped at a doorway. He could hear water running and steam wafted out into the hall. Must be the bathroom, he thought. He looked inside and saw that a wall divided the room into two sections. I will take Boots. You go in here, said Dulcet, indicating one side. Gregor guessed it must be girls on one side, boys on the other, like locker rooms. He thought maybe he should stay with Boots, but he felt as if he could trust Dulcet, and he didn't want to upset her again. Okay, Boots. See you soon, okay? Bye-bye, waved Boots over Dulcet's shoulder. Clearly, she wasn't having any separation anxiety. Gregor veered off to the right. The place did kind of resemble a locker room, if locker rooms were gorgeous and smelled good. Exotic sea creatures were carved into the walls, and oil lamps cast a golden glow. Okay, but it's got benches and lockers, sort of, he thought, taking in the rows of stone benches and the open cubicles that lined one side of the room. Merith had followed him in. He addressed Gregor nervously. This place is the changing room. Here are the rooms for relief and cleansing. Can I get you anything, Gregor the Overlander? No, thanks. I can figure it out, said Gregor. We shall be in the hall if you have need, said Merith. Okay, thanks, said Gregor. When the Underlander ducked out of the room, he felt the muscles in his face release. It was good to be alone, finally. He made quick inspection of the place. The relief room held only a solid stone chair with an opening cut in the middle. Looking inside, Gregor saw water running continuously in a stream underneath it. Oh, must be the toilet, he thought. The cleansing room had a small steaming pool with steps that led down into the water. A fragrant smell filled the air. His whole body ached to get in the water. Gregor quickly returned to the changing room and stripped off his sweaty clothes. Feeling self-conscious, he peed in the toilet. Then he hurried to the pool. He tested the temperature with his toe and slowly walked down into the steamy water. It reached his waist, but he discovered the pool had a bench around it. When he sat down, the water licked his ears. This sounds like a nice place to take a bath. A current washed over him, releasing the knots in his shoulders and back. Gregor cut the surface of the pool with his hands, and the water ran through his fingers. Like the water in the toilet, it flowed in one end of the bath and out the other. Must be some kind of underground stream, he thought. He sat straight up as the idea hit him. The water came from somewhere, and it went somewhere. The water must have come from somewhere, and it went somewhere. If water could get in and out of the palace, maybe he could too. Chapter 6. All right, well, hold on a second. Before we move into chapter 6, let's talk a little bit about what's going on here, right? Bath. He finally figured out what the bathrooms are like underground. But what's the big point of this chapter? Well, he meets a nice woman by the name of Dulcet. I think she was about 15 years old, taking care of Boots, and taking good care of Boots. Like, she has experience with that. We also know that he's going to get clean, but really it's about the water, right? That whole chapter's big moment in the growing of this story is really getting him deep into the castle, giving him some time alone, allowing him to think about how the water comes in and must flow somewhere. So his thinking is maybe this is the way he gets a chance to escape, right? That's what you need to know when you leave chapter 5. But maybe you might need to remember Dulcet and the fact that he's in a castle that's like got very hard to escape from, right? Chapter 6. Gregor scrubbed himself down using a sponge and some gloopy stuff he found in a bowl by the pool. He lathered his hair and even cleansed inside his ears, wanting to get every bit of Overlander smell off him. He was going to try to escape. He needed to be as indistinguishable from his hosts as possible. On hooks by the pool hung a row of white towels. Gregor couldn't identify the thick woven fabric. Sure not cotton, he muttered. But the towel was soft and absorbed water much better than the thin, worn ones that they used at home. He walked back into the changing room, drying his hair, and found his clothes had disappeared. In their place was a neat pile of smoky blue garments, a shirt, pants, and what seemed to be underwear. They were much finer than the towels. The cloth ran silkily through his fingers. What is this stuff? He wondered, slipping into the shirt. He slid his feet into a pair of braided straw sandals and padded out of the changing room. Meredith and Perdita were waiting. So what happened to my clothes? Asked Gregor. They have been burned, said Meredith apprehensively. Gregor sensed Meredith was afraid he'd be mad. It is most dangerous to keep them, said Perdita, by way of explanation. The ash carries no scent. Gregor shrugged to show he didn't care. That's cool, he said. These fit me fine, and they're comf. Meredith and Perdita looked grateful. After a few days of our food, you will be without much odor as well, said Perdita encouragingly. That'll be nice, said Gregor dryly. These Underlanders were sure obsessed with his smell. Dulcet emerged from the left side of the bathroom carrying a squeaky clean boots. She had on a soft rose-colored shirt and a clean diaper made from the same material as Gregor's bath towel. She extended her leg and pointed proudly to the new sandal on her foot. Sanda, she said to Gregor. He struck out his foot to show her his. Me too, he said. He assumed that they'd burned Boots' clothes as well. He tried to remember what she'd been wearing in the case that he had to explain the missing stuff to Mom. One dirty diaper, no loss. One pair of scuffed pink sandals her feet were growing out of anyway. One stained t-shirt, I think it should be okay. Gregor didn't know exactly what he would tell his mom about the Underland. The truth would scare her to death. He'd worked out something when they get back to the laundry room. But the sooner that happened, the simpler the story would be. Boots reached out her arms, and Gregor took her, pressing his nose into her damp curls. She smelled fresh and a bit like the ocean. She is well grown, said Dulcet. Your arms must be tired. She went back to the changing room and came out with some kind of pack. It fitted on his back with straps, and Boots could ride in it, looking over his shoulder. He had seen people carrying kids in specially designed backpacks, but his family did not have the money for that kind of stuff. Thanks, he said casually, but he was secretly elated. It would be a lot easier to escape with Boots in a backpack than in his arms. Dulcet led them up several staircases and through a maze of halls. Maze of halls? That's a metaphor. It's not really, but it just means that there's a lot of halls and there's no way that he's going to be able to do that. So a maze is something, but a maze of halls is a metaphor, allowing our brain to kind of really see that this is a very intricate castle. Dulcet led, and through a maze of halls. They eventually wound up in a long room that opened out onto a balcony. We call this High Hall, said Dulcet. I think you guys forgot the roof, said Gregor. While the walls were decorated with greatest care, there was nothing but black cavern above their heads. Dulcet laughed. Oh, no, it is meant to be so. We entertain here often, and many bats can arrive at once. Gregor imagined the bottleneck of 100 bats that would cause in trying to get in the door downstairs. He could see the advantage of a bigger landing strip on the top. Vicus was waiting for them by the balcony with an older woman. Gregor guessed she might be around his grandma's age, but his grandma was stooped and moved painfully from arthritis. This woman stood very straight and looked very strong. Gregor and Boots, the Overlanders. My wife, Solovet, said Vicus. Hey, said Gregor. Nice to meet you. But the woman stepped forward and offered both her hands to him. The gesture surprised him. No one else had ever made any effort to touch him since he'd landed. Welcome, Gregor. Welcome, Boots, she said in a low, warm voice. It is an honor to have you among us. Thanks, Gregor mumbled, confused because she was throwing his prisoner status off balance. She really made him feel like someone special. Hi, you, said Boots, and Solovet. Solovet? Solovet. I'm going to say Solovet. It's Solovet. So let's talk about that word. It could either be Solovet, or Solovet. I like Solovet. That's how I'm going to say it. If you disagree, then you need to write me and tell me how I should say it. Hi, you, said Boots, and Solovet reached up to pat her cheek. Vicus tells me you are very anxious to return home. It pains me that we cannot aid you immediately, but to seek the surface tonight would be impossible, she said. The Underland buzzes with news of your arrival. I guess everyone wants to look at us, like we're freaks or something. Well, they'd better look fast, thought Gregor. But he said, then I'll get to see some stuff down here. Vicus waved him over to the low wall that ringed the balcony. Come, please, there is much to view, he said. Gregor joined Vicus at the wall and felt his stomach lurch. He involuntarily took a few steps backward. The balcony, it seemed, hung over the side of the palace. Only the floor separated him from the dizzying drop. Do not fear, it is well built, said Vicus. Gregor nodded, but didn't move forward again. If the thing started collapsing, he wanted to be able to make it back to the high hall. I can see fine from back here, he said. And he could. Regalia was even more impressive from above. On the ground, he could see that the streets, which were paved in various shades of stone, were laid out in a complex geometric pattern so that the city looked like a giant mosaic. He also hadn't realized how big the place was. It extended out several miles in each direction. How many people live down here? Gregor asked. We number 3,000 or so, said Vicus. More if the harvest reaps well. 3,000. Gregor tried to get a mental picture of how many people that might be. His school had about 600 kids in it, so 5 times that? So what are you guys doing down here anyway? Asked Gregor. Vicus laughed. We are amazed it has taken you so long to ask. Well, it's a marvelous tale, said Vicus, taking a deep breath to begin. Once, many years ago, there lived... Vicus, interrupted Solovet, perhaps the tale would go well with supper. Gregor silently thanked her. He was starving, and he had a feeling Vicus wasn't the kind of guy to leave out any details. The dining room was off the high hall. A table had been set for 8. Gregor hoped Dulcet would be joining them, but after tucking Boots in a sort of high chair, she backed up several feet from the table and stood. Gregor didn't feel very comfortable eating with her standing there, but he thought he might get her in trouble if he asked her or, said something to her. See how my eyes tipped off and then I just started finishing it? It does that sometimes. Neither Vicus nor Solovet took a chair, so Gregor decided to wait too. Soon Luxa swept into the room in a dress that was a lot fancier than the clothes she'd been wearing in the stadium. Her hair was loose and fell like a shiny silver sheet to her waist. She was with a guy who Gregor guessed was about 16. He was laughing at something she had just said. Gregor recognized him from the stadium. It was the rider who felt cocky enough to lie down on his bat as they swirled around his head. Another show-off, thought Gregor. But the guy gave him such a friendly look that Gregor did not exactly jump to conclusions. Luxor was annoying, but most of the other Underlanders were pretty okay. My cousin Henry, said Luxa shortly, and Gregor wanted to laugh. Here among all these strange names was a Henry. Henry gave Gregor a low bow and came up grinning. Welcome, Overlander, he said. Then he grabbed Gregor's arm and spoke in his ear in a dramatically hushed voice. Beware the fish, for Luxa plans to poison you directly. Vicus and Solovet laughed, and even Dulcet smiled. It was a joke. These people actually did have a sense of humor. Beware your fish, Henry, returned Luxa. I gave orders to poison scoundrels, forgetting you would be dining here as well. Henry winked at Gregor. Switch the plates with the bats, he whispered. And at that moment, 2 bats swooped into the room from High Hall. Ah, the bats! Gregor recognized the golden bat Luxa had been riding earlier. A large gray bat fluttered into the chair near Vicus, and everyone else took a seat. Gregor, the Overlander, meet you, Aurora, and Euripides. They are bonded to Luxa and myself, said Vicus, extending a flexed hand to the gray bat on his right. Euripides brushed the hand with his wing. Luxa and her golden bat Aurora performed the same exchange. Gregor had thought the bats were like horses, but now he could see that they were equals. Did they talk? Greetings, Overlander, said Euripides in a soft, purring voice. Yeah, they talked. Gregor began to wonder if fish dinner would want to chat as he sliced into it. Nice to meet you, said Gregor politely. What does that mean, that you're bonded to each other? Soon after we arrived in the Underland, we humans formed a special alliance with the bats, said Solovet. Both sides saw the obvious advantage to joining together, but beyond our alliance, individual bats and humans may form their own union. That is called bonding. And what do you do if you're bonded to a bat? Asked Gregor. I mean, besides play ball games together. There was a pause in which glances were exchanged around the table. He'd said something wrong again. You keep each other alive, said Luxa coldly. It had seemed like he was making fun of something serious. Oh, I didn't know, said Gregor. Of course you did not, said Solovet. Sorry, I'm getting used to that name. Sorry, geez. Shooting a look at Luxa, you have no parallel in your own land. And do you bond with the crawlers too? Gregor asked. Henry snorted with laughter. I would as soon bond with a stone. At least it would be counted on to run away in battle. Luxa broke into a grin. And perhaps you could throw it. I suppose you could throw a crawler. But then I would have to touch it, said Henry, and the two began cracking up. The crawlers are not known for their fighting ability. The crawlers are not known for their fighting ability, said Vicus, by the way of explanation to Gregor. Neither he nor Solovet were laughing. He turned to Luxa and Henry. Yet they live on. Perhaps when you can comprehend the reason for their longevity, you will have more respect for them. Henry and Luxa attempted to look serious, although their eyes were still laughing at each other. It is of little consequence to the crawlers whether I respect them or not, said Henry lightly. Perhaps not, but it is of great consequence whether Luxa does, or so it will be in some 5 years when she comes of age to rule, said Vicus. At that time, foolish jokes at the crawlers' expense may make the difference between our existence and our annihilation. They do not need to be warriors to shift the balance of power in the Underland. This sobered Luxa up for real, but it killed the conversation. An awkward pause stretched into an embarrassing silence. Gregor thought he understood what Vicus had meant. The crawlers would make better friends than enemies, and humans shouldn't go around insulting them. To Gregor's relief, the food arrived, and an Underlander servant placed a half circle of small bowls around him. At least 3 contained what looked like various types of mushrooms. One had a rice-like grain, and the smallest contained a handful of fresh greens. He could tell by the skimpy portion that the leafy stuff was supposed to be a big treat. Pause. I have no idea what one would eat in the underground. I mean, almost everything that I eat has green leafy substances to the tops of them, which means that they need light in order to grow. There is no light, so no wonder mushrooms don't need light. Mushrooms are decomposers. Mushrooms could grow in the dark. That's pretty cool. Now, I have to understand, of course, the green leafy stuff is going to be of little amounts because there's not very much green leafy stuff in the Underland, right? I can't imagine any reason why there would be, unless there's holes where they grow some. Anyway, let's get back to it. I do know they're going to eat fish. Now, I don't know how you feel about fish, but I'm kind of so-so with it. I grew up not eating very much fish, so it's not a part of like what I'm used to eating. I know some of you come from families that like only eat fish. Like, well, I lived near the ocean, so of course I fished, and of course that's what we ate a lot of. Me, I lived in the middle of ground, land. Like, yes, there were rivers and stuff like that, but the reality was, meat. That's kind of what I enjoyed, right, Meg? That's kind of what you enjoyed as well. Anyway, a platter with a whole grilled fish was set in front of him. The fish resembled the ones Gregor was used to, except it had no eyes. Told you, don't need them in the darkness. He and his dad had once watched a show on TV about fish that lived way down deep in some cave and didn't have eyes either. Told you, those are real too, on Earth. The weird thing was that when the scientists brought some up to study in labs, the fish had sensed the light and had grown eyes. Not right away, but in a few generations. That's pretty cool. His dad had gotten very excited over the show and had taken Gregor to the American Museum of Natural History to look for eyeless fish. They had ended up at the museum a whole lot, just the two of them. His dad was crazy about science, and it seemed if he wanted to pour everything in his brain right into Gregor's head, it would. It was a little dangerous because even a simple question could bring on a half-hour explanation. Pause. That's like hanging out with me, right? All of a sudden I get this idea and then I get completely sidetracked and I start telling the story and then I go, oh, but then there's this one, right? Okay, I got you. I'm coming back. Sorry, geez. Do you also notice that Gregor right now is actually having a memory of his dad when he should be paying attention to the fish that's right in front of him? Do you notice how the author is helping us understand Gregor at a deeper level? He's talking about a really important solo adventure with his dad, right? How many of us desire that right now? Like, I'll go out on a trip with my dad. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden I start thinking about the trips that we've taken. My motorcycle rides and the bike rides and the car rides. And boy, I did a lot of riding with my dad and scuba diving and stuff like that. Anyway, so that's what I'm talking about. You get kind of lost in that piece. It was a little dangerous because even a simple question could bring on a half-hour explanation. His grandma had always said, ask your daddy the time and he tells you how to make a clock. But he was so happy explaining that Gregor was just happy being with him. Besides, Gregor had loved the rainforest exhibit and the cafeteria with French fries shaped like dinosaurs. They had never really figured out how the fish had known to grow eyes. His dad had had some theories, of course, but he couldn't explain how the fish had been able to change so fast. Gregor wondered how long it took people to become transparent with purple eyes. He turned to Vicus. So you were going to tell me how you got down here? While Gregor tried not to wolf his food, which turned out to be delicious, Vicus filled him in on the history of regalia. Now, we've been reading for 32 minutes. My alarm goes off, and I always promise my readers we're going to be right around 32 minutes. So let's summarize what has happened. Well, Gregor took a bath, thought about the fact that there was a hole and water needed to go someplace, so maybe he could go there. They gifted him some really comfortable clothes, and Boots is in kind of a pack on his back, probably sitting next to him now, but he's got a pack. So he thought that was going to help out. We've met Solovet, the queen, Vicus's partner. Luxa and Henry have come in for dinner, and bats eat dinner at the table, a gray and gold one. But remember, these are big bats, not small ones. And there's this thing called bonding between bats and humans, and they keep each other alive. And we don't want to make fun of the cockroaches. They are kind of, I guess, not as smart per se, but yet they've lived for a very long time. So Vicus says it's better to have partners with the cockroaches than enemies. And they've talked a lot about how dangerous it is, right? That's a big deal. Tomorrow, you come back and we'll talk about the history of Regalia, right? Regalia is the town, the underworld town. And for those of you who are recording, we're on page 70. We're on page 70. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time. I am going to go off and do some adventuring of my own. I've got a little bit of a project that I've been playing with, and now it's about getting my hands dirty, just a little bit at least. It has been such a pleasure to be with you. It's been a gift to start another week out. I wanted to remind you so that you make sure that you load yourself up with the Mr. O reading time. Remember, reading every day makes you stronger, but then doing it independently and practicing some of the things that we've done here will make you even stronger. Don't let all stories just get told to you. Read, practice reading, get stronger. Don't let anybody keep that power away from you. It's a superpower. I'm not kidding. It really is. So I hope that you have enjoyed this time. I hope you have grown a little bit. I hope your imagination flowed. Maybe you drew some really cool pictures. I'll see you tomorrow, okay? It's been really nice to be with you. Well, remember, this is a safe place. Treat people with dignity and respect. respect the learning space of others, and manage yourself. And go and share some love. I'm really proud of you. Thank you for the time. I'm honored and graced with the time that we get together. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I love you. Now, get out of here. I'm not kidding. Get out of here.